the regulatory process has encouraged us to acquire a less sustainable model for our farms. The regulations have changed the ability for a lot of us to intercrop and to grow a lot of different plants in our square footage, that now we're paying for every square foot, and we have all of these things that are really kind of threatening to push us off of our intention and our sustainable model. And so anyways, that was kind of a tangent, but I came back through the county process in Humboldt County. They had a program called the RRR program. And that program was to take your forest, if you were in a place that was not conducive to permits. And for me, the reason that my homestead was not conducive to permits was because the indigenous people, the Yurok people, it is their homeland on both sides of the Klamath River and actually the entire Pacific North Coast of Humboldt County. But they had a zero tolerance policy for cannabis. And they implemented that policy 4 years ago. And as a heritage cultivator, as a permaculturalist, as someone who really felt connected to the land and to the people, I was really disappointed, and I couldn't believe that this impact of all this green rush and all this stuff that was happening around me was also going to impact my family and our ability to garden in our homestead. And so because of this inability for me to pursue a permit on that property, we got to participate in the program that was the Restore, Remediate, Relocate, and Remediate. And the county offered us 4 times our square footage if we moved into prime ag land. And so, prime ag land is absolutely beautiful. It's soil that's meant to be cultivated along the banks of the Eel River. It has a really beautiful history in the 1964 flood that came through. There was a mill site and the river makes a 90-degree turn. And so all the log decks and the sawdust and the bark and everything were kind of there. And when the flood happened, all of that stuff got deposited onto my property in this swirling eddy of sawdust and wood chips and bark and logs, and then 11 to 12 feet of sediment was dropped on top of that. And so for me, we have since 1964 and throughout millennia, I'm sure this is historical throughout the years, throughout the millennia of this farmland, but we have been gifted this beautiful hugel swale, basically. You know, it's got all this microbes and biology and this really high water table and this silty loam soil that holds that water. So we're really lucky. We are super seasonal. So I participated, I moved from the Klamath down to the Eel, and I moved into the full sun, and so there's no hiding, there's no gates, there's no nothing. You just, here's my farm and here's my farm. And so that transparency has been really great for someone like myself and my husband who are proud of what's behind that gate. And so when people come in, they can see all of our practices, they can see for themselves what a sun-grown, seasonal, organic farm should and could look like if given an opportunity to farm it as farmers farm. And so small farmers farm. So anyways, that's a little bit of my history. And so I was talking a little about how the regulations have created these unsustainable streams or have made these impacts. And I really just wanted to bring out some of the good things that have come from regulation for us. There are those of us who have been cultivating clean cannabis because we eat clean food and because we care about a clean earth that are not worried about these pesticide tests. There are those of us who are really excited to have the opportunity to tell our story with our cannabis packaging. We're really excited to be able to enter into a regulated marketplace, and we're first. We are super lucky in Northern California that we have a permit process in Humboldt County which has allowed these farms to get regulated and to get their state licenses or to get in line for their state license. And through this process on July 1, which has been kind of a reckoning day for the cannabis industry as a whole, we have lost a lot of our dispensary partners, we've lost a lot of our delivery partners, we've lost a lot of our farming and manufacturing partners, but those of us who are tenacious and those of us who have good practices, we have an opportunity to shine right now, and we have an opportunity to claim that space on the shelf and keep it. And this is something that has been really hard for small farms and for sustainable, organic, or code word, whatever, sustainable, that's not my favorite word, but anyways, for those farms. So while there have been some negative things, there are all kinds of positive things that we can do on our farms to maintain that heritage and to push that into the future. And so this year we kind of talked about, my husband and I were looking at our plastic stream. How can we reduce our plastic stream? Because this is a new parcel to us, we have a lot of development that needs done. We built a barn, we need a septic tank. You can't build a septic tank in the winter, so we needed a summer crop, so we were gonna pull a light deprivation, which is usually not one of our practices. So we were balancing our plastics. So we looked at our plastic stream and we thought, okay, in addition to that, I'm on a certified organic hay field, so I also don't have a huge abundance of compost material and things I can use for on-farm fertility. We have been developing those over the last couple seasons. And so we were like, hey, maybe I'll plant all my starts. It's a bigger farm than we're used to, so I was gonna have to buy a lot more plastic 4-inchers for my nursery starts. And it dawned on me when I was at the co-op that these compostable paper cups, I could just write on the cup, and I'd have A, I wouldn't have my plant tag, and B, I wouldn't have to buy more 4-inchers. So for $58, I got 2,000 compostable paper cups. And so I was like, yes, this is awesome, because this is a reduction in my plastic stream, 2 pieces of plastic that are gone, and I can now use this compostable paper in my compost heap. And so that was really great. There are lots of other things that we are learning to implement on the farm. Like I hadn't heard of the TerraCycle, is that what you called the recycling? I hadn't heard of that, but I am really interested in finding ways that we can take all of these things that they have mandated us to have now and use and somehow get them returned to us or turned into something else useful. Let's see, what else should we talk about? What's my timing like? How has my messaging changed? My messaging has changed the last few years because I'm learning about dry farming. And dry farming is an absolute mind bend. Everything I knew, I do have generations of wisdom to draw from, and so everything I knew about building soil and forest soils and composting and my compost teas, my fermented plant juices, and all of these things require an application of water. I would water before I would compost tea, I would water before I would fermented plant juice, I would water in the tea, in the juice, and so it's been very interesting learning how to work with the soil that I have. We are in 100% native soil, and so learning and trusting and taking everything that I knew and learning something new has been really interesting and dynamic. And so I just had an assessment the other day. I had someone come in, and here's our beautiful compost tea brewers, and here's my fermented plant juice buckets, and here's my thing of nutrients, and here's all this stuff, and all my irrigation system, and none of it's set up, and I don't really know what to do to it. Do I throw it away? Do I really want to use it? But I don't want to use it because I've got this amazing technique that is useful in my valley, and that I'm learning from these new neighbors. And so I've been hesitant to say I'm Chrystal and I dry farm. Usually it makes people be like, how many times did you water it? You have to be lying, or whatever. And I feel like I'm just learning this space, and I'm learning how to work within the parameters of what I have. And so typically I would have been like a real advocate for no-till farming, and now you'll see me till my farm till dust. And I would have been a huge advocate for companion planting in my rows and planting clover in the opposite where I'm walking. And now the whole concept for dry farming for us is like heating the soil, and so we need the soil to be bare. What we exchange in watering, we have to work with the hula ho and keep our little dust mulch going good on top. And so my messaging has changed in all those buzzwords no longer apply. And so when I'm working out with growing my beneficials and my companion plants in the rows, this year, because we have such a high water table, we're uber seasonal, and we had water table for a long time, so I had to wait till the soil was just right to till and to do my cultivating of the soil. And so the cannabis took precedent, like it needed to go in. I'm paying for that square footage, the cannabis needs to go in. And so then I went through and I planted all my seeds that I usually would for my companions. And we had 17 days of 35 to 50 mile an hour sustained winds. And I think that the majority of my seeds for my companion plants were not viable, or may come up later in the season, I'm not sure. But a lot of my companion plants did not come up, and now the cannabis is big and kind of shading out that canopy anyways. So there's just a lot of learning that's happening and a lot of change that's happening in that space. But I am a strong advocate for all of those wonderful things, for no-till farming, for companion planting, for cover cropping, and that's how I get my soil fertility and everything. But I'm learning that you can't take those practices that I believe to be universal and apply them everywhere. And so you can't, your knowledge that you have gained and that you have is really personal and is really related to that place and time and to that space that you're at. And so now that I'm in this new space and time, there's a whole new world of knowledge that I have to gain. And it's unique and specific to that parcel. And on the grand scheme, I think it's probably like that on every parcel. If you choose to work with native soil and to work with your terrain, I really think that a lot of the learning that takes place on your specific farm would come from observation, observing your neighbors' practices, observing the forest practices around you that happen naturally, and trying to recreate that and working with what you have. And so now I feel like with the dry farming, I relate a lot more to the one straw revolution and to the like do nothing farming. And you know, we have a lot of jokes about, you know, I watered all day, you know, and like make these jokes about how I must have nothing to do on the farm now since we don't water or feed or do anything. But there's still lots of fun there. So I just want to close with the concept of this was future perspectives from a heritage grower. And I really wanted to express here that this whole world is looking at where we are in California in particular. They're watching us. They're watching how we regulate. They're watching what we do. And so while it is important to always follow the regulations and do the right thing, it's also important to create relationships with the regulators and to tell them why these things that they've put into the regulations aren't good for the environment, don't match California's energy policy, whatever buzzwords you want to use, express to them, call the CDFA, have them come out and talk to them about what's important to you on your farm and why is it that you need the path to do that. Because I don't think that this regulation is intending to wipe out so many of our sustainable techniques. I think it's the one-size-fits-all approach to regulation that doesn't work for heritage and small cultivators. And so I really just wanted to close with, I believe that this opportunity is ripe for people who know how to grow clean cannabis and have small farms. I believe that third-party audits and certification are gonna be our dear friends. These are things that, you know, they're trusted sources that people are gonna come in and see our practices. Not only do they come in and see your practices to tell the world, they also come in and see your practices so that you sharpen how you express that to them. You start to sharpen your input logs. You start to say, well, I kelped here, or I did this. No, it's actually on the calendar. You can see who applied it. You can see, you know, what strain showed flower first, what strain had powdery mildew first, all of these things. So these independent audits, independent assessments are really leg up for heritage cultivators. And so I encourage the independent audit companies to recognize that with heritage cultivators and understand that sometimes the cost and the burden might be heavy, but to, you know, for reaching hands across the border, you know, so farmer says, hey, I'm willing to do all this stuff, and the assessor says, I'm willing to assess it and look at it so that when this value can be recognized by the consumer, we all win. And I wanted to point to Tara Mahoney's comment about how can indoor be sustainable. This is a big issue for me in a lot of ways also. And I just wanted to express that the more we push on our environmental sustainability as sun-grown cultivators, and the more we talk about our energy footprint, the more we talk about our water, we talk about our nutrient usage and our benefits on the world around us, the more market share we're going to capture. The more market share we're going to capture from these operators, the more they're going to want it back. And so then they're going to be strengthening and greening their footprint so that they can get some of those consumers back. And when we have that give and take of the process, then we made the world a better place. You know, if these indoor growers are feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my best customers to these people who are sun-grown and whatever, well, I'm going to figure out how I can reduce my energy, and I'm going to show that off so that I can get those guys back. And so I think there's a time and a place for everything, and prohibition's not going to go down without a fight. And I'm just really excited to see so many of my friends and family in Northern California and Humboldt County pursuing permits and being able to pass these tests and getting places on the shelves right now. And there is a lot of light and a lot of hope in the future for us. And when we see all of this industry coming in and looking at all these things that we're seeing as burdens, they see the opportunity. And we need to recognize that we have the knowledge, the skills, the history, and the ability to show California what California can do for cannabis and other ag. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.